Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm going to be making character designs based on executions. I'll be making every design decision from the color to the shape language to model them closely to these punishments of a bygone time. Starting with the guillotine. The guillotine is a French beheading machine that uses the momentum of a falling, slanted blade inside a tall wooden frame to swiftly dispatch any unfortunate soul who kneels at its feet. For this character, I knew right away that the slanted blade of the guillotine's killing edge would be the major inspiration for this character. The guillotine may seem like a barbaric instrument, but in reality, it was designed in part by its namesake, Joseph Ignace Guillotine, with the intention of making executions more humane. I won't get too graphic here, but executions were much sloppier and more drawn out prior to the invention of this beheading machine, so at least at the time, this was seen as an improvement. With that in mind, I'll make our first assassin a little cheerful and friendly looking, and I know I want her to frame her face with her hands, a little like the brackets of the guillotine. I've been trying to use the hands as more of an expressive element in my character poses lately. I think it adds a lot even if hands are kind of annoying to draw. I had two possible options for her hair. At first I thought to do some sort of like classic over-the-top powdered French wig kind of look, you know, very like Marie Antoinette. But then I thought it would be more interesting to do an asymmetrical bang at an angle to imitate the blade. I tried to keep repeating this angle in different places on her design, like on the collar of her shirt and in a little decorative panel on the front of her corset. I had an idea to symbolize the steps up to the guillotine with a pannier, or side hoops, which was a type of undergarment that would help hold a skirt out on the sides. I tried to also keep the boxy shape of the beams and overall structure of the device, with a little hair covering above her bangs. I think it really gives the vibe of the machine. The little last added design piece was a basket-style bag, which was meant to look like the basket that the head would fall into. The guillotine was perhaps most famously used in the French Revolution to execute the royals who had been enriching themselves at the cost of their starving public, so I imagine this assassin would be an energetic idealist who kills for the common man. Her weapon of choice would of course be any kind of blade, and I see her as believing that she's acting on the part of justice, with little to no remorse for her deadly actions. The guillotine itself is known by many names and phrases, such as the regretful climb, the national razor, and the silence mill, to name a few. But this character has no name, so as I often do in these character design videos, if you have a good one for her, please leave it in a comment. I will select my favorite and that will become the real one. Oh, and if you didn't see in the comments of my last character design video, the selected names for our senses as characters were Iris for sight, as suggested by Seraphina's and many more, Septum for taste, as suggested by Alina Wang, Nell for hearing, as suggested by JJ Creator, the Handmaiden for touch, as suggested by the Pig Village, and Cypress for smell, as suggested by SunnyBC2MU. Next we have an assassin designed after Aqua Tofana. Now technically Aqua Tofana was not used by a government, but rather a conspiracy of women in Italy. It was sold out in the open as a perfume or other innocuous item such as a devotional bottle for St. Nicholas. But this was no perfume. In reality, Aqua Tofana was a secret cocktail of arsenic, lead, and belladonna that was a liquid with no flavor or color, and it was slow acting, usually taking 4 doses to be fatal, which allowed it to mimic the slow deterioration of an illness instead of the sudden dramatics of your average poison. The first dose would cause cold-like symptoms, but with every concurrent dose, the poison would take greater effect, eventually causing severe stomach pain, vomiting, and death. This poison was developed and sold primarily as a device to permanently free women from their husbands, in a society and a time when women were often married off without their consent and treated, legally and socially, as the man's property. This extreme measure was popular as it was one of the only ways out of what could be a deadly and miserable situation. We hear of an account at the time of what this poison would do in Chambers' journal. Administered in wine or tea or some other liquid by the flattering traitress, produced but a scarcely noticeable effect. The husband became a little out of sorts, felt weak and languid, so little indisposed that he would scarcely call in a medical man. After the second dose of poison, this weakness and languor became more pronounced. The beautiful Medea, who expressed so much anxiety for her husband's indisposition, would scarcely be an object of suspicion, and perhaps would prepare her husband's food, as prescribed by the doctor, with her own fair hands. In this way, the third drop would be administered, and would prostrate even the most vigorous man. The doctor would be completely puzzled to see that this apparently simple ailment did not surrender to his drugs, and while he would be still in the dark as to its nature, other doses would be given, until at length death would claim the victim for its own. To save her fair fame, the wife would demand a post-mortem examination. Result, nothing, except the woman was able to pose as a slandered innocent, and then it would be remembered that her husband died either without pain, inflammation, fever, or spasms. If, after this, the woman within a year or two formed a now connection, nobody could blame her, for, everything considered, it would be a sore trial for her to continue to bear the name of a man whose relatives had accused her of poisoning him. It is said that over 600 men were killed this way, though it's hard to know exactly, as these details aren't well documented and some of the deaths could be mistaken for natural causes or vice versa. The woman who is credited with creating this poison was named Aqua Tofana, and she is sometimes given credit for some part in those 600 deaths, though it's likely that in reality her very name became a synonym for this type of poisoning murder and more of a colloquialism. What became of her is the stuff of legend. Some say that she died of natural causes, others that she found sanctuary in a convent where she continued creating the poison and distributing it through a network of nuns to women in distress all over. And some report that she was tortured and executed for her crimes. You can read more about this in Mike Dash's comprehensive article on the subject, which I will link in the description. The most fascinating part of this poison for me is that its slowly growing symptoms seem to have been consistent. No one has been able to recreate it today. Its subtlety and untraceable nature has not been recreatable even though we know the ingredients that went into the poison. The primary inspiration that I took for this character was first the belladonna ingredient. Belladonna can cause the pupils to dilate, so I wanted her eyes to be huge. I also wanted to have some indication of the heart, since this was mainly used to end marriages, so I had her with her hands posed into a heart, her eyes staring out above. It was described that the poisoner would often pretend to attend to her dying husband, giving her more access to give future doses, as well as to keep suspicion off herself. I used the berry of the belladonna as an inspiration for her hair buns, and kept the colors watery and a little mystical. There is certainly a witchiness to this whisper network of women, creating advanced potions to free their sisters and friends from abusive and unhappy marriages, which brings us neatly to our next execution, the pyre, or being burned at the stake. In sharp contrast to our secretive, mysterious, watery Aqua Tofana, our next assassin character must be sadistic and fiery, as being burned at the stake is something humanity has only done in its darkest and cruelest hours. Though this punish has been used in religious conquest throughout history, I often think specifically of the various witch trials, which use fire out of fear that the body of a witch, if not completely destroyed, would be able to be re-embodied. During the witch trials that occurred in the United States' earliest days, rumors about a person could quickly snowball into paranoia that could be deadly. This assassin character, therefore, seems like a sort of manipulator who could use her charms to get dirt and information on her target long before she strikes. I wanted her color palette to sharply contrast with Aqua Tofana's, and I decided to draw her with a fire poker in her hand, her other fingers crossed. I imagined her as a sort of smooth liar, and decided to make the whites of her eyes charcoal gray, to sort of symbolize the way that crowds would stand by and watch people from their own community be put to death in this horrible way. I should probably mention this, but I personally think the death penalty should stay in the past. I think considering all the times the justice system has imprisoned innocent people by mistake or by malice, our government should not be doing anything this permanent anymore. But focusing on the dark and unchangeable past, the witch trials did not, of course, always result in executions by fire, so I tried not to lean too hard into any witchy elements necessarily on her, focusing mainly on representing fire in various places on her design. I also had her looking up, as many people were burned as heretics or non-believers in the name of multiple different religions. For her outfit, I stuck with a pastiche of crucible-like garments, keeping everything very burnt in color and very warm. I think she'd be the most outgoing and dynamic character, but also the one in the group that the others trust the least. And when her mask of friendliness or like jokiness would slip, I think she would definitely be the most terrifying. Next, I want to talk about bog bodies. Bog human sacrifice, to be precise. Mummies have always been fascinating to me since I was a small girl, and bog bodies are one of the most fascinating instances of natural mummification. We have intact bits of jewelry, cloth, and most crucially bodies with skin and organs preserved that date back to the Mesolithic period, giving us information that fossils absolutely cannot. Though some of the bodies found in bogs are completely skeletonized, some are so well preserved that you can see the expression clearly on their face, the Tulund man being one of the most amazing. It's kind of emotional seeing a face from that long ago that it so clearly looks just like a person you could meet on the street. Now certainly some of these bog bodies were likely the result of someone accidentally falling in and drowning or being laid to rest there after death, but evidence of quite a few of the recovered bodies suggests foul play. Anthropologists who study these bodies have theorized that some of these bodies were victims of human sacrifice, though of course the long gap in history makes it difficult to know for sure what their goal was. What we do know is that a statistically abnormal amount of Danish bog bodies from the Neolithic period are between the ages of 16 and 20, and that many of the bodies have ritual ornamentation on them, like bronze or gold cuffs on their arms and necks. Many of them were held down with forked sticks, crossing over them and pinning them. A fair few of them were clearly members of the upper class, with well-manicured nails and evidence of good nutrition found in their hair protein. So for this character, I wanted to include a cape of peat with spikes of the sticks that would sometimes be crossed over them to hold them. The tannins in the bog would stain the skin very dark, so I also wanted to show some of that staining on her hands. I decided to change her irises to clocks because I think that the time freezing quality of the bog is really one of the most interesting things about it. I think the reason for this is a variety of different like acidification and just sort of like the antimicrobial quality of the bog. Like most of the forces that break down our bodies with bacteria and parasites just aren't able to thrive in this particular type of location. And I think that that's just so amazing that you can just be frozen like that. I also put rope on her design as a nod to the rope that was found around the necks of a few different bog bodies, including the Tulund man and the Yid girl, and I put in a metal cuff around her neck as a nod to the ornamentation I was talking about earlier that was found on some of the bodies. I also tried to make her hair kind of the shape of leaves as a nod to the natural resting place that all these bodies were found. This character would probably be a calm but unnerving presence. I think she would probably spend years tracking down her target, learning every detail about them before making sure that they simply vanish from society. I think she'd also be a survivalist who could easily spend months to herself, hiding in the wild until the trail went cold. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that it was informative and not too morbid for you. Leave your name suggestions in the comments as well as any requests for a future character design video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons and members, including HoneyKitten18, Pink, Novel Goblin, West Art Channel, Loro, Data, Random World, Lily McFarlane, Artist James, Jamie C, Yume Lily, Skitten, Gold Pikachu, Among Us Skibidi, Aurora Morgan, Becca, Anastasia Evsiva, Kobe Octo VT, Viet, Graveyard Moss, Grexius, Maddie Momo, Brandon Stark, CB, Luciana Majiki, Liv, Ravenscrow, Zocelot, T-Hill Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Kadaria, Astral Fox Art, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, Cola, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.